And very happy Monday to you at 12:07 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
John, over the weekend, former Orange County Congresswoman Katie Porter sat down with Fox 40's Nikki Lorenzo for a 25-minute interview. And I can't explain why, but there's something so familiar about her to me.
That is Katie Porter. She is running to be the next governor of California. She is a former Democratic member of Congress, ran for the U.S. Senate last year, a professor at UC Irvine, and a single mom of 3 kids. And Katie Porter joins us now on Inside California Politics. Thanks for being back.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
She's got a little shang in her, too.
I'm going to add that one to the collection.
Absolutely.
And that wasn't quite the little girl Katie Porter voice, but it was halfway there.
Oh, we never played that whole sound from the other day, did we? Of where she was calling all of her donors to thank her in the high-pitched voice.
Well, we couldn't play the whole thing. Some people drive around town with dogs in their car.
Hello, everybody.
Earmuffs, doggies, earmuffs. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. The big news over the weekend is that former President Joe Biden announced that he has cancer. And not just any kind of cancer, but advanced prostate cancer that has already spread to his bones. This is regarded as being stage 4 cancer and a very serious medical condition that obviously needs to be dealt with. He says he just found out about it now, but if you've been watching cable news and watching the chat shows and the medical experts and doctors talking about prostate cancer and when people usually find out about it, it seems that many of them are, let's just say, skeptical about the dates that have been provided so far. Usually, when you're a man of a certain age, they test your PSA count. Every time you go in and you do blood work, it's something that they keep a very close eye on. So when you get a cancer like prostate cancer, they don't find out about it until it's extremely advanced. They find out about it early on so they can treat it and hopefully prevent it from ever getting to that point. This, of course, is going on at the same time that a bunch of tell-all books about Joe Biden's presidency are coming to bookstores. One, written by CNN's Jake Tapper, that debuts tomorrow. I've already ordered my copy, haven't had a chance to read it yet. The other book that's out that has people talking is a book called Fight. And it's written by 2 reporters, 2 writers who have written about past presidential elections where they have unbelievable access to both campaigns. And they tell you a lot of the behind-the-scenes stories as to just exactly what was going on. Well, this weekend, I received my copy of that book, and I just plowed all the way through it, read it cover to cover. And it's a very interesting time to read a book like that when all of this news is breaking about Joe Biden's medical condition. We knew that his mental condition had been deteriorating, and he had a loss of cognitive abilities that had been going on for quite some time. We're now just learning about the cancer diagnosis. But this book, and these books, I'm sure plural, they shed a lot of light on what was going on in that campaign. And if you like political gossip, oh my God, these books are filled with political gossip. So I tried to remember as many stories from the book, the salacious ones, because that's what we're all interested in. Let's be honest about that. And I'm going to try to let you know just exactly what they found. Now, one of the suggestions that I've seen on social media and beyond about who is running the country, who is in charge of the government when Grampy Joe was out of it. And if he was being treated for cancer, he was out of it even more than what we assumed. And it seems like one of the answers that you hear all of the time is that former President Barack Obama was actually running some kind of shadow government. Because Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president, they have known each other for quite some time. They were rivals, turned ticket mates, turned White House mates. And people assumed, okay, since they worked together in the White House for 8 years and Barack Obama was calling the shots and now Joe is the president and he's mentally out of it, the assumption was that Barack Obama was the one who was still acting as president of the United States. According to this book, that is not true. How do I know that? Well, according to the book, Barack Obama has an extremely low opinion of Joe Biden.
Apparently, Obama was the one that told Biden not to run in 2016.
That's right. And that's the reason that the Bidens and the Obamas don't like one another, specifically Jill. According to the book, Jill is the one that holds all of the grudges and never gives it up. Joe knows where all the bodies are buried. He just forgot where they are. Jill is the one that has Irish amnesia. The only thing she remembers are her enemies. And Barack and Michelle Obama are right at the top of the list.
And right below that was Kamala.
Oh, yes. He was the one that thought that Joe would not be viable in 2016, so he got behind Hillary Clinton in place of Joe. That's why Joe didn't run in 2016. Joe thought he would have been able to beat Trump in 2016 and that Hillary would lose. Obama told him he was wrong, got behind Hillary Clinton, and then Hillary Clinton went and lost to Donald Trump. And Joe Biden has never given up that grudge. So there's no way, no chance, no how Joe Biden was going to let that guy be in charge of his administration. The other thing that I found out about in the book is that Barack Obama has an extremely low opinion of Kamala Harris, too. When they were talking about Joe stepping down from the ticket and replacing him with someone else, Obama said, yes, we should do that so long as it's not Kamala, because he thought Kamala was worse than Joe. He wanted it to be Gretchen Whitmer instead of Kamala. He thought that the governor of Michigan would be a much stronger candidate for president than Kamala Harris, and that's who he wanted. And Randy, you were telling me a story that you heard that was also in the book about how long it has been since Barack Obama has disliked Kamala Harris.
Well, this is what's great. I didn't read the book, but I do know all these stories because the authors went on Gavin Newsom's podcast. And since I'm the only listener of Gavin Newsom's podcast, I heard this story about how when Kamala Harris was AG, there was some big Obama campaign event, and Kamala Harris was trying to get into a VIP tent for friends and family only. And she was denied by the Obamas.
Oh, yes. Kamala Harris is not welcome, and apparently she was very upset about that, and she took it very personal.
Well, and then when Joe Biden steps down last summer and immediately makes this deal with Kamala, everyone gets in line except for the Obamas, who wait a week before endorsing, and they didn't want to do it live. They didn't want to do it in person, so they put together that phony baloney recorded fake phone call.
Yes, where only she was recorded and the Obamas weren't, because Michelle said she didn't want to take the time to get camera ready.
And immediately you saw a campaign full of inauthenticity.
I will repeat myself.
So it's not just Obama that had a really low opinion of Kamala. So did Joe. When pressure was being put on Joe to step down as the nominee, the answer that he and his operatives were giving to members of Congress, donors, state party chairs is that, fine, you can knock Joe out, but if you replace him with Kamala, you are sure to lose because she is such a weak candidate. And then they would explain in chapter and verse why Kamala Harris was incompetent as a vice president and would be even more incompetent as a candidate. So right after they spent all of that time cutting her down to all of these decision makers, when it came time for Joe to finally step down as the nominee, he screwed them all over by endorsing Kamala Harris immediately after announcing he would not be a candidate for the presidency. However, before he gave Kamala his endorsement, he told her there was one catch. There was to be no daylight in between the two of them. she could not take a position on any issue that differed from his position.
And that led to probably the most fatal moment of her campaign, Kamala going on The View and asked what would she do differently from Joe Biden, and she couldn't think of anything.
Nope, because she wasn't allowed to. That was part of the deal.
Quote, no daylight, kid. No daylight.
And as all of this was going on, there were other candidates who were already starting to work the phones by calling state party chairs to find out where their delegations were. And while he was going on his podcast and going on television interviews saying he had sub-zero interest in running for president, the one who was most aggressive behind the scenes was none other than California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Interestingly, this part of the book does not get discussed on Gavin Newsom's podcast.
Yeah, gee, I wonder why.
And what's great is whenever you listen to Gavin's podcast is whenever you have authors or media people that want to ask him a question, he dodges every single time and says, oh, we'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about this.
The one that Grampy Joe hates the most is Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi was the hitman that shivved him and took him out of the race.
We love everybody.
He says he will never forgive her until he dies over doing what she did. And they described her as being an assassin with zero remorse that stands out as someone who is cold-blooded in the profession of politics.
Quite frankly.
They think that woman doesn't have a pulse. Now, before Joe Biden stepped down as the candidate for president for the Democratic Party, according to these books, as far gone as he was in public, he was worse in private. He would not remember anyone's name. He was always getting sick. He was always catching colds. He was always under the weather. He was never someone that they regarded as being healthy and vibrant. And whenever something would go on where he would screw it up, they would always blame it on him having a cold. For example, when the debate happened and he did you-know-what in the bed, they said, that's not the normal Joe. The normal Joe is putting Rubik's Cubes together behind closed doors, but he had a cold, and that's why he was off his game.
Well, what's even more interesting is they said he had a cold, but according to the authors in the book, what he had was a really awful case of COVID where special doctors had to get brought in.
Well, and then there was that one time he was in Las Vegas right before he stepped down, and they were kind of nebulous with how they described it. He had some kind of severe medical event that happened in Las Vegas that they weren't honest about. They speculated that it was related to COVID, and they said that he had COVID at that moment in time. But they also hint that there could have been something more to it than that. I guess we'll never know. Maybe we will now that people are starting to ask questions related to the cancer diagnosis. But something definitely happened in Las Vegas. That was right before he stepped down, because don't forget, when he announced that he was getting out of the race, he was being quarantined at his place in Delaware. He was not at the White House when that happened. He was in Delaware at his beach house in Rehoboth Beach. Joe Biden is a guy who, according to the books, it was never in the cards that he was going to win the election. At no point in time did the numbers internally, what his campaign was producing, or externally ever suggest that he was a viable candidate. And the Democratic insiders knew that very early on. Now, as far gone as he was in private, listen to this story. Remember when he had that conversation with the dead congresswoman?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. After he did that, he apparently was extremely embarrassed. The people at the White House were embarrassed because the woman's family was there, and he had this full conversation with the dead lady. So they invited the woman's family to the White House, and Joe Biden was offering to give them a personal tour of the White House to try to make up for what he did to them publicly. And because the dead congresswoman came from the House, Kevin McCarthy, who was then the Speaker of the House, joined the family for the tour. Apparently, that was one of Joe's most out-of-it days as president, where he was totally gone in the middle of the day. So he took this family on the tour of the White House, and he was trying to get into rooms where all the doors were locked, and he couldn't figure out how to open up the door. And he had to call custodians over who had keys to the doors, and he was showing them things like broom closets. And then at a certain point, he took this entire family into the men's locker room and was going into great detail. Oh, this is where I change. This is my locker. These are other people's lockers. Here's the soap. There's the shower over there. And apparently he just kept going on and on and on and on and wouldn't take this family out of the men's locker room. And I assume people are going in and out of there. I don't know. And then Kevin McCarthy finally had to cut him off and grab him by the arm and take the entire family and Joe Biden out of the locker room and take them back into the office because Joe just kept meandering on some pointless story that no one could follow.
Yeah.
According to the books, the one who was the MVP in this campaign was Susie Wiles, of all people. And there wasn't really a whole lot about what was going on the Trump side of things because all the drama was going on the Democratic side. But according to these books, she professionalized his operation in ways that 2016 and 2020 were not professional. And that campaign ran on half the money of Kamala Harris and ran a lean and mean operation. But these books are out. If you have interest in that campaign, I highly recommend it. I read that book in 2 days, and I can't wait to get my hands on the next one. But that's what I found out over my weekend reading. And if you enjoy it, check it out. The book is called Fight, which is a quote from Donald Trump after he got shot in Pennsylvania. Well, it seems like every time you click refresh on your social media feeds or the LA Times website, whatever the case may be, we find out that the high-speed rail is going to cost us even more money. Despite the fact that it's become a great big money pit, Gavin Newsom is doubling and tripling down on the state of California investing in high-speed rail.
Gavin was asked about the high-speed rail at his May revised budget presentation, and he says, hey, we've got through all the hard stuff. It's all fun times ahead for HSR. For more, here's Fox 40 and Eitan Wallace.
Yeah, well, the governor says the California high-speed rail project is full steam ahead. But
oh, God. Eitan, do better.
Project is full steam ahead, but Republicans argue it's on the wrong track.
Okay, in his defense, maybe someone else wrote that for him.
I understand it's Sacramento. It's a smaller market, except Eitan's pieces usually run statewide on other stations like KTLA. Come on, Eitan. Do better.
Well, we're moving forward with high-speed rail.
Governor Gavin Newsom this week making clear he's reinforcing his support for a project he believes will transform the future of California.
And by the way, you know what he did? He committed to spending $1 billion a year from cap and trade money, which is part of the reason gasoline is so expensive, for the next 20 years.
It just gets better and better, doesn't it?
Which, by the way, isn't enough to fund the train.
No, and if they keep asking us for more money, it's never enough.
High-speed rail. It's a project set to connect Anaheim to San Francisco at first.
No, it isn't.
Wait, every time we hear what city it's supposed to go to and what city it's supposed to depart from, it's different cities and different timelines.
The original plan voted on in 2008 was Los Angeles to San Francisco, with eventual expansions to San Diego to Sacramento. The original LA to San Francisco line was supposed to be completed and operational by 2020. Now the plan is by 2033, you'll be able to go from Merced to Wasco, not Bakersfield, Wasco, which is 15 miles outside of Bakersfield.
Now, wait a minute, Randy. Maybe there's a lot of demand out there for people to visit friends and family in prison.
Maybe that's the ridership.
And eventually San Diego to Sacramento. In the near term, though, Newsom is confident the first phase of the project set to connect Bakersfield to Merced will be complete by 2033.
No, it won't.
Why do you even continue to make these promises when you know you have zero ability to follow through on it?
Well, and 2 years from now, this isn't even going to be his problem.
And that's why he's doing it. He's going to blame everything on the next governor, on the politicians in the next legislature, and he's going to say, had they done exactly what he told them to do, it would be fully operational. But don't blame him.
You can see the progress we've actually made with our high-speed rail system. We're now on the other side of the environmental reviews. We're on the other side of the land acquisition.
There's going to be 2 gubernatorial elections before this is even supposed to open, at least.
And I'll tell you, when you listen to him make these promises, after reading that book and finding out just exactly what kind of duplicitous liar this guy is, how he can go on TV and say one thing. He can say, I'm not running for president. I have sub-zero interest in running for president. At the same time, at night, he's burning up the phones, calling different delegations, trying to see if they would be interested in supporting him. He's going on TV talking about how Joe Biden puts on a master class as president when he's seeing the behind-the-scenes action with his own 2 eyes and he realizes the guy is demented. There is nothing that comes out of this man's mouth that is authentic. He is willing to do or say anything to accumulate as much power as he can. That's the only thing he believes in.
Hagenberger. We're now on the other side of the environmental reviews. We're on the other side.
By the way, it's not an accomplishment to say that the environmental review and permitting process took 15 years. That is an indictment of everything that's wrong with California.
And by the way, the homeowners in Pacific Palisades and Altadena are going to find out that it takes about that long for them, too.
We're now on the other side of the environmental reviews. We're on the other side of the land acquisition. You saw just a few weeks ago, we were in the valley. They're actually...
Nothing will tell you how useless CEQA is in 2025 than the fact that a project that Californians voted for, that the government wanted to do, that was getting federal funding, was tied up in courts for 15 years.
That is the most California aspect of this story.
They're actually, and forgive me.
You know, I feel bad because someone warned us about all this, and we decided to ditch her in the street. But Shangy told us.
The bureaucracy is real.
Who knew she had clairvoyance?
They're actually, and forgive me, it's a technicality, they're laying tracks to get to where they start to lay the tracks.
Wait, what?
Okay, that doesn't mean anything.
They're still laying tracks to lay down a test track, which they'll need to test for several years before they can build the rest of the track.
It's a technicality. They're laying tracks to get to where they start to lay the tracks. It's a technical way of actually doing the development in phases. So real tracks are being laid.
But the project has faced its challenges.
You don't say.
You know, I'll tell you, in the context of everything that we're learning about Joe Biden and what went on in Washington, D.C., with his cognitive abilities flying out the window long ago, and everyone in the Democratic Party, with the exception of Dean Phillips, a congressman from Minnesota, and a couple others, David Axelrod was one of the people who was being honest about it. So was Jim Carville. But the rest of them, no. They were all on the same page saying that he was fine. They were all on the same page saying that behind the scenes, this guy was running laps around everyone else, that he was asking pointed questions, that he read all the books that were given to him. He was the most prepared person in the meetings. He could wake up the earliest and stay up the latest. They were saying all of these things that are provably false. They were lying. And they all knew they were lying. The mainstream media did it too. But they were all on the same page, and no one broke character. Everyone was just committed to the lie. Look at what's going on right now in California with high-speed rail, where we all know it's a failure. It's just like we all knew Joe Biden was demented. We all know that high-speed rail is a boondoggle and a failure. How do we know this? We can't ride the train. They told us we'd be able to ride the train. We can't ride the train. And every time we get an update, it's going to take longer and cost more money. But you look at Newsom, and you look at the people in the legislature, and you look at the people running for governor, and you look at the unions, and they all say the same thing. The train is a huge success. It's a smashing success. It's something that we should pride ourselves on. Other states should copy us. It's in no way connected to reality the same way the Biden praise was. But it's what they're saying, and none of them will break ranks. It's like we're living in a state that's controlled by a religious cult, and you see something in the sky that's blue, and everyone tells you it's red, and we all have to say it's red.
Well, you saw what happened at that candidate forum hosted by the unions where Katie Porter tried to speak out against the train, and she got shouted down loudly.
I feel like we're living in an episode of The Twilight Zone.
The project has faced its challenges, including the high cost. The California High-Speed Rail Authority acknowledges the original plan presented to voters in 2008 indicated the project would cost about $45 billion, but the estimated costs have since ballooned, with projections now indicating the project could cost anywhere between $88 to $128 billion.
And those are low.
Oh, yeah, it's going to cost a lot more than that.
On top of that, there is no estimated completion date for the entire statewide route. The issue garnering the attention of President Donald Trump. He's threatening to cut funding from the federal government for the high-speed rail. This is what the president said just last week.
Hundreds of billions of dollars for this stupid project that should have never been built.
It all comes as California faces a $12 billion deficit and as the Bakersfield to Merced section of the project still needs about
Wasco, not Bakersfield.
Get it right.
And as the Bakersfield to Merced section of the project still needs about $7 billion to ensure completion.
Are you prepared to fund it?
I asked Newsom to weigh in during his budget presentation this week. He says he has a plan, specifically proposing $1 billion per year to fund high-speed rail, funding that would come directly from California's cap and trade program.
Cap and trade, by the way, was supposed to expire after 20 years. And now they're extending cap and trade specifically for this project that hasn't cleaned up one speck of air.
No, and cap and trade was supposed to be about greening the economy, greening the state. It's a slush fund for projects that are bankrupt.
In a nutshell, the program allows companies to buy credits to offset their greenhouse gas emissions. The money raised from those credits then gets allocated to pollution-reducing projects like the electronically powered high-speed rail.
How much pollution is that reduced?
This is just money laundering.
And let's not forget, if you're wondering why high-speed rail started in Fresno to begin with, it's because when we passed the bill and we were going to get matching dollars from the federal government, it was Obama's administration that said, hey, I want you to start this thing in a disadvantaged community that has high rates of asthma. How much asthma have we reduced in the construction of this non-existent high-speed rail in the past 15 years?
Instead of starting at a population center where, let's just say you started in the Bay Area and you realized it was just never going to be completed, you could at least have some infrastructure where you could say, all right, we'll just expand BART and this will become part of BART and we'll find a way to make it useful. But if you start out in the middle of the state, you can't do that because you're out in the middle of nowhere because of equity.
I want to get it done, and that's our commitment.
But
says somebody that's only got a year and a half left on the job.
But Tulare Republican Assembly member Ale Macedo argues the money will be better spent elsewhere. She's calling on Newsom to shift $1 billion per year from high-speed rail to water resources and fire prevention.
Yeah, that's not going to pass.
Of course not.
How we can show the people that are paying for this, which is the taxpayers, that they're getting more bang for their buck with the high-speed rail. I would always argue water infrastructure and wildfire prevention is the way to go.
And so the governor now has 1 month to negotiate his high-speed rail funding plan and, for that matter, his entire $322 billion proposed budget with the legislature.
Because, you know, there's total oversight going on in Sacramento.
Oh, yeah. This is the same legislature that whenever they were going to take a look at what was going on over at the California Department of Insurance, Ricardo Lara, the insurance commissioner, would just not show up for the meetings, and they were fine with it.
I'm very kind of sketchy.
Reporting at the state capitol, covering local news that matters, Eitan Wallace, Fox 40 News.
So there you go, Gavin Newsom doubling down on high-speed rail, but we're not done there, Johnny, because this morning a new report came out from Ashley Zavala and KCRA3. The high-speed rail is even broker than we thought.
And Randy, after hearing Gavin Newsom in the last segment talk about how great high-speed rail is and how we're going to finish this project and we're going to prove the naysayers wrong, it reminded me of another part of that book Fight that I read over the weekend, When Grampy Joe dropped out of the race and Kamala decided that she was going to start calling state Democratic Party chairmen to try to make sure their delegations were locked down for her, someone in her orbit suggested that she call the California delegation first because they're the largest and that's her home state. And she said, oh no, I'm not even going to bother calling them. I'm sure Gavin already has them locked down. And if he doesn't, there's no way Pelosi would allow them to vote for me. So she started with the state of Florida, and she worked her way through the southern delegations that had large black populations, and she figured if she could lock the South down, then she would be on her way. And as it turns out, that worked for her. All right, let's go to the phones and welcome Robert in San Jose. Robert, hello.
Yeah, this high-speed rail, it kind of reminds me that there's a movie kind of has the theme of the high-speed rail. It's called Idiocracy, where everyone gets eventually is dumbed down and they all live on the train for it. And there's a Dead Kennedy song that's called California Uber Alles. So these are pop culture anecdotes that are coming true because we got this weird sort of People's Temple fascism in this state. And this guy is a complete sociopath, as Adam Carolla has actually said accurately. The guy lies like $8,000. And we cannot reward him for all the restaurants he's destroyed with his gas taxes. We cannot reward this man. He's tortured everyone. It's not just cap and trade, it's the fuel taxes. You remove those, as Carl DeMaio wants, we will have a raise for everybody. All the labor union agreements that have happened underneath Newsonomics and Bidenomics have married us to high prices. We can hardly get the restoration that we need with energy independence. Poor Trump. I mean, seriously, they've like trying to ruin everything he does, and it's ridiculous. And Newsom is the most spiteful guy ever, and I can't stand him. And I hope everyone else thinks the same.
Well, thank you so much for the call, sir. We appreciate it. Now, Randy, even though Gavin Newsom is doubling and tripling down behind high-speed rail, the costs, well, they just keep going up.
Ashley Zavala, KCRA3, here with an update.
Some breaking news in a story you'll only see on KCRA3 this morning. We have an update now on California's embattled high-speed rail project. That's the bullet train that voters approved to go from Los Angeles to San Francisco. But the project, as originally pitched, is nowhere near that point.
So this morning, we're learning the project could need even more money to complete its first segment between Merced and Bakersfield. KCRA3 Capital correspondent Ashley Zavala is here now with the very latest on this.
Yeah, this is brand new information. At last check, that Merced to Bakersfield line was expected to cost California taxpayers $35.3 billion. But sources tell
$35 billion for a train that goes from one part of the Central Valley to another part of the Central Valley.
That you could drive lickety-split.
But sources tell us project leaders are now warning lawmakers that cost could grow again, now up to $38.5 billion. This also means the project's budget gap could reach up to even more than $10 billion again, just for this Central Valley segment. The High-Speed Rail Authority has confirmed these new figures. Now, the possible funding gap presents even more questions about the project. That Bakersfield to Merced line was expected to be completed between 2030 and 2033, but the project's Inspector General earlier this year warned that may no longer be the case.
Didn't Gavin just say at his press conference it's going to happen on time?
And then one day later, it's out of date.